Hello, my name is Victor-Jan Vos and I'm the Head of Collections and Services at the NIOD Institute in Amsterdam. The NIOD Institute is a research institute that researches and provides collections about war, Holocaust and genocide in the Netherlands, but also worldwide. And we focus mainly on the events that happened in the 20th and 21st century. In this presentation, I will tell a bit about why the NIOD is part of the PROHUB project, Protecting Oral Histories Using Blockchain. And I will tell what actually the purpose is of the collections that we are going to use in the project and how they are going to be protected. This is really a use case about PROHUB, and this of course needs to be further investigated, needs to be further researched what you can do with blockchain, but it's an interesting development for us for the future. And I hope to explain a little bit about what is the use case about and how can we go on from here. So I'll give you a bit of a background in the collections of the NIOD. This is what our stacks look like. It's in a very nice building in the center of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And we maintain and we collect about 400 archives, which is about nearly 4 kilometers in it. The archives are really about the Netherlands in the World War II. It's about Holocaust. It's about persecution of people that were part of the occupation of the Nazis during 1940 until 1945. Apart from the archives, we have 175,000 images of the Netherlands in World War II, 1,800 war diaries, diaries that have been written by people who were present during the occupation, letters, a huge collection of letters, 13 meters, and the archives themselves are actually quite popular. We have about 25 researchers per day, and these researchers fill our reading rooms in the center of Amsterdam every day, and they collect they research these archives that we have. We also have quite a big library with material that you can use to study the archives. In essence, some of the archives, about two-thirds of the archives that we hold in our building are actually owned by the Dutch National Archives, which makes, of course, that we need to be very careful in providing access to them. So the NIOD was founded in 1945 by this guy that you can see on the right. It's Mr. Lou de Jong, and he said, well, there needs to be a documentation center in the Netherlands about what happened in the Second World War. And this was really the first things that they collected. Lots of folders with information, clippings, documents, records, everything that you can find about the World War was collected, and they were described, and they were used for a big study that Lou de Jong made between the 1960s, 70s and 80s, and of course for that you needed a lot of archives. This resulted in this thing. This slide some examples of what the archives looked like. Fairly colorful diaries, for example, here on the left-hand side, and a diary written on toilet paper, if I'm not mistaken, but also more record-like documents, like this is a notification and application of a Dutch, what you can now say a collaborator, but of course at that time that was not so clear, information about how he registered for a German army, what his information was, and you cannot see it very clearly, but there's information about his race, there's information about his religion, and so on. And of course, as this can now be seen as a collaborator, you want to be very careful in who can have access to this information and for what purpose. Nevertheless, you want to provide access to them. This is digitalized, of course, but it is not actually online available because of these privacy concerns. So that's quite an issue for us, that we have a lot of information digitally available, but we don't have it we cannot provide it online on the website when people provide it. So we are very much busy with what you can call access control. This is a picture of our reading room where people can need to access the archives. And the majority of these collections are access controlled, which means that you have to provide a reason for accessing it. It might be that you are a researcher, might be that you have some personal reasons to be able to access the archives. For example, your father or your grandfather was one of these people that were mentioned in the documentation. You want to know what is available. So we cannot allow photography in the reading room only after special permission. So we check everyone and we check the purpose of what you are photographing these things for. And very soon now, in about two years, some of the restrictions will really disappear because of a law which expires at that time in 2025, saying that according to the archival law in the Netherlands, you are able to gain access without a specific reason to doing so. Nevertheless, of course, the GDPR continues to exist. That's why a concern for privacy and a check on privacy privacy information needs to stay. Like I said, we're very keen on the restrictions. We need to make sure that these restrictions are being kept. But we continue to digitize as well, because that makes these documentations very much easier to access. We have some databases and so on to make them available. So if you look more closely, you have 4 types of access restrictions that provide the restrictions on what people can do with our information. First of all, the Dutch archival law, the Archiefwet. The GDPR, which really looks into privacy, copyright, which protects the rights of makers. You can imagine these very colorful and nicely painted comic books can be protected by copyright. And on the other hand, we still have some contractual agreements with donors. So some people have said you cannot access these documents only for these specific purposes or only in time. We tend, of course, not to do this a lot because that's a very difficult thing to administrate. And basically, if someone comes to us and wants to use these documents, you have to take care of any of these 4 access restrictions that either come from public law, the Archiefwet, the GDPR and copyright, or from a private agreement that we have with someone. So why we are in this project is how can we control and check and restrict the access to and the use of the digital and digitized documents that we own, that we have of these collections. Is there a digital way of restricting access and also granting access? Yes, there is. The people from the AIT came to us and said, look, this can be done via a blockchain, which means that people register themselves on the system and then provide their identity information towards the system, and the system checks, yes, this is someone who can get access because of either the restrictions on the document or on their competencies, like they are a researcher or they have provided some sufficient information to grant access to it. So what we have provided to the project are 4 collections. First of all, the diary archives, 2,000 diaries, about almost 38 meters, which is quite a lot. I think it's one of the biggest diary collections in at least the Netherlands, but maybe even in the world. And 15 meters of personal accounts in archives that can contain information about people in concentration camp, people in prison that have been imprisoned by German authorities. And of course, you can imagine that there's a lot of privacy concerning information in these archives, either from people who were victims or people who are the perpetrators. But as there might be a lot of information about living persons in these archives. The fourth collection is the Ravensbrück concentration camp, which is an archive which contains a lot of testimonies and interviews of people who were detained in the concentration camp in the north of Germany. And indeed, again, there's a lot of information that can be considered in the terms of GDPR personal information. So what we have done for the project PROHUB is to look at all this information, and basically this is what came out of it. There's either public or not public information, and this information is either restricted by any of the four laws that I mentioned, so the archival law, the GDPR, copyright, or a contractual agreement, or it can be provided easily and publicly to anyone who would want to get access to it. And what does it mean, getting access to it? Well, you can look at the scan, you can either reproduce, download, share, or reuse. You can even go one step further and make a private copy out of it, or you can have quotation rights of it. And for each of the documents combined with each of the people that are wanting to gain access to the collection, there's a different combination made. So basically what the PROHUB system will do is connect the person that is signing on with his or her own key code, and will combine it with the information that is in the system of the documents that they are trying to provide, and checking whether what the person wants to do, or what the system, if it's an automated user, what the system wants to do, and see whether that's actually possible under the license that is being provided. The system then in itself creates this license. It's both human readable and computer readable, and grants the access automatically. So it takes a lot of effort that we have to do in this study room that we have towards the system, and this allows us to make these documents available in an automated way, online and digitally. And that's basically what the use case is of the PROHUB project for the NIOD, and I think it can also be very much valid for other types of archives that either contain information about World War II or the Holocaust, but also archives that have a much more contemporary collection, because of course the closer you come to present day, you will find more information that needs to be protected according to the GDPR, or even to under copyright. And what we want to do is really to see how can we put this system that is now being developed, it's a prototype or it's a beta, how can we put this into our use case once we have everything in order with the system. So basically that is the use case. This video needs to be looked at in combination with Sven's of AIT presentation, where he will explain how the system actually makes this work. What we have done, we have looked at the requirements and wishes that we have from the archivist side of things, and now Sven will explain how this will work on a technical level. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope there will be some more use of this very innovative, very new way of making sure that licenses on protected documents that are quite sensitive in some way still can be made available for anyone who wants to make use of it, either for research, for personal use, or for any other use if the licenses themselves allow it. Thank you very much.
In this video, we give an overview of the technical aspects of the PROHUB project. The acronym PROHUB stands for Protecting Oral Histories Using Blockchain. This recording was done on the 9th of January 2023, and the project has received funding from the European Commission's Connecting Europe Facility program. In the following, we will give an overview about the motivation, concepts, principles, and main use case of PROHUB. We explain who the stakeholder is and what type of collections we use to demonstrate the PROHUB implementation. We introduce an e-archiving use case for packaging collection data and show how we manage and persist resource access information. From a technical perspective, the goal of PROHUB is to demonstrate the benefit of and synergies between the European e-archiving initiative and the blockchain service infrastructure. The e-archiving initiative provides standards and tools for digital archiving, and the European blockchain service infrastructure provides APIs which allow using the European blockchain services. The NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies is the stakeholder of the project and provided collections to test PROHUB's archiving and access implementation. The collections include personal reports and accounts of people who suffered during World War II. The material is considered sensitive and therefore secure control mechanisms are required to ensure safe archiving and access processes. Technically, the e-archiving initiative defines standards for packaging collections. Each information package has so-called representations, which allow storing the collection items in different formats. Here we have a JPEG master representation on the left side and an OCR PDF representation on the right side. The second representation is derived from the first one by applying optical character recognition to extract the full text from the image. The e-archiving standards allow organizing the data and defining processes for creating information packages which are submitted to the archive, the so-called SIPs, information packages which are stored in the archive, the AIPs, and finally, the information packages created for dissemination purposes, the DIPs. In this case, the DIP contains an aggregated, searchable PDF which bundles all searchable PDF pages available in the AIP. PROHUB uses the E-ARK repository reference implementation to ingest and store information packages. The screenshot shows the information package management overview with 3 archived information packages. To demonstrate access to collection items, it is possible to perform metadata and full text search for text documents. In this example, we search for the location Bentheim, which returns one PDF file match, one of the document images, which includes a plain text layer. We can display the document of the search result, and the matches of the term Bentheim are highlighted. So far, so good. The repository allows full text indexing and searching for documents containing specific search terms. However, when dealing with sensitive material, the question is, which of the documents may actually be full text indexed, and who is allowed to access them? In PROHUB, there are 3 types of authorizations. An applicant may be authorized to use a discovery service. A discovery service may be authorized to index a resource, and an applicant may be authorized to access a resource. Usually, this kind of information is configured in the repository using the system-specific application logic. We argue that there is a need to persist resource access authorization metadata in a system-independent and standards-based form. This need can be illustrated using the example of system migration. This is when an organization at some point decides to replace their repository system A by a new repository system B. Ideally, the archival data would not need to be modified for that purpose, but in reality, this operation usually requires retransforming the archive data into an SIP format, which is understood by the new system. But that's another story, which we won't go into now. The problem we are focusing here is that reconfiguring authorization settings in the new system is labor-intensive and time-consuming. The PROHUB approach that we propose is that authorization metadata and licenses remain valid after system migration, so that signatures and licenses can be interpreted by the new system. Related to this resource access authorization use case, PROHUB has identified a couple of requirements. First, it must be possible to define write statements on information package, representation, or file level. Second, It must be possible to define right statements related to the application of software agents, enabling information retrieval, such as optical character recognition or full-text indexing software, for example. And third, it must be possible to define right statements regarding information applicants. In line with recommendations of the E-archiving initiative, we use premise metadata for recording events and rights related to the digital objects. We start by defining an object which stands for the intellectual entity, so for the information package as a whole. We then introduce a second object, which is the master image representation. A third object is the searchable PDF representation. Finally, we express the fact that the second representation was derived from the first one. In summary, using premise, we can create objects for all levels down to the file level and thereby relate rights statements to all of these levels. Regarding the second requirement, a software taxonomy allows grouping software agents so that right statements can be assigned to a specific software such as Tesseract OCR, to the group of optical character recognition software, to the group of information extraction tools, or at the highest level in this example, to the group of tools performing or enabling search and retrieval. We are then able to relate a right statement to any of these levels in the software taxonomy. In this example, we take the most generic level of the tools performing or enabling search and retrieval, and we define that this group is allowed to be applied to the representation created for dissemination purposes. This representation could contain anonymized content or where specific parts have been blacked out. If an internal policy states that applying the search and retrieval tools is only allowed if this is explicitly stated in the metadata, it can be demanded from the repository system provider to consider these metadata and enforce them. The third requirement is analog to the second one, with the only difference that the agent is a person or researcher requesting access to the resource. In this case, the license agreement is stored as part of the information package, and the event of the license agreement conclusion is recorded. The events of the license agreement conclusion consists of a sequence of steps which are recorded in premise metadata and registered in the blockchain in form of transactions. The steps are to register the dissemination object, create a text license document, the provider assigning the license, the applicant accepting the license, and finally, the provider approving the request. Regarding blockchain, PROHUB uses the European Blockchain Services infrastructure. To store metadata about events in the blockchain, we are using the EBSI timestamp API. Basically, this API allows storing timestamped hashes on the blockchain and retrieve them for validation. EBSI defines a series of use cases to support verifying credentials, tracking and tracing, trusted data exchange, and more. Especially relevant for PROHUB is the so-called notary use case, which in EBSI terms falls into the category of document traceability. The key aspects of the blockchain notary use case are the following. Only a fingerprint, or technically a hash, of the document is stored. It is impossible to derive the original document from the hash value only. A transaction stores the hash value with a timestamp when it was performed. The hash value may represent a single document or multiple documents. Documents may be signed or hashed together with signature files. The information in the blockchain serves as a proof of existence and, optionally, proof of authenticity. With the help of EBSI, metadata events persisted in premise can be registered in the blockchain. This allows then validating premise metadata against the blockchain registry. The benefit of this kind of blockchain validated metadata is that the integrity and authenticity of resource access and authorization metadata is ensured, and the protection against manipulation is guaranteed. In summary, PROHUB offers benefits for the implementation of a digital repository in many aspects. The security aspect. Information security is enhanced by using blockchain-based digital identity, authentication, and authorization mechanisms. The transparency aspect. The use of international open and widely adopted standards to record restrictions and conditions for access and license agreement processes. The accountability aspect. Making sure that any event of changing data or metadata can be reported and explained in a trustworthy manner. The authenticity aspect. Making sure that collection items can be clearly attributed while the integrity of the digital object is always guaranteed. And finally, the cost effectiveness aspect. By using existing EU infrastructure and services, technical means can be leveraged to build solutions in a very cost-effective manner. This was our short introduction to the PROHUB project. More information can be found at the website prohub.ait.ac.at. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.